Hi, Lou Pulsfer here to talk about a fairly esoteric question. How much unit differentiation do you need in a war game? In other words, is one type of unit enough? If, say, it's a land warfare game, is an army good enough? Or do you need to have elite armies and green armies? Do you need to have cavalry armies and infantry armies? Do you need to have tank armies and infantry armies and so on? Well, this partly depends on the subject, the topic. Are cavalry important in this context? Well, then perhaps you should include cavalry. Is it a grand strategic game? That is to say, is it a very high-level game where armies are good enough, or is it a much lower-level game, even a tactical game, where armies or individual infantry units are just not sufficient to differentiate what's going on? Now, this question came to mind for me when I saw an electronic version of Britannia that had been modified to include elite units and housecarls and green units instead of just using armies. And of course, both Italia and Hispania, which rely quite a bit on Britannia but are designed by someone else, use D10s and have these additional kinds of units. Is that necessary? Well, again, partly it is a matter of the topic. It's partly a matter of how high level the game is, whether it's operational, whether it's tactical, whether it's strategic. But also I think it's a matter of design philosophy. My philosophy, which many people have heard from me before, is a designer knows he has achieved perfection not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. If the game will do with just armies, then that's what should be done. In the case of Britannia, I added cavalry for the Normans because it was fairly important. And I have the Romans be different from normal armies because they were professional armies. But I didn't go further with unit differentiation because the game's at quite a high scale, and especially a long time scale, and I didn't feel it was necessary to have more types of units. So the short answer to this is, of course, it depends. And it depends on what you're trying to show, on how important it is that there were different types of units. But it also depends on whether you want the game to be a puzzle or a game. That is to say, a puzzle is something has an always correct solution. You can solve it. And most single-player games are of that sort in the end. So are you making a video game? Then making it a puzzle and having additional units to make that puzzle more complex might make sense. Also, of course, if you're making a video game, people expect a lot of complication that the computer will then take care of. They don't expect simplicity because for some reason people think that puzzles have to be complex. So it depends on what you want to do, and thanks for listening.